Welcome back to What Brought You Here Today. On today's episode, I sit down with Kendra Olson, a licensed social worker and owner of Psychotherapy for Maternal Wellbeing. Kendra and I talk about perinatal and maternal mental health, how to reframe your own narrative in your parenting experience, cultural and societal pressures, healing your inner child, and what traumatizing your child actually means. Please take care while listening. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to What Brought You Here Today. I am your host, Ryan, and I am joined by Kendra Olson. She is another therapist in the Minnesota community. Kendra and I are just actually meeting for the first time as we're recording. I put out an ask in a group on Facebook, and I got some people who were interested. So she is one of those, along with a handful of others that you guys will be hearing as this year goes on. So, Kendra, thank you so much for being here. I appreciate it.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Why don't you tell the listeners a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Yeah. So, Kendra Olson, I'm a career as a psychotherapist and also a mom. And I specialize in my therapy practice in perinatal and maternal mental health. So, really basically, mostly work with people who identify as women and moms anywhere along that productive phase of life. So, oftentimes they might come in with infertility challenges, emotional challenges, infertility treatments, all the way through really motherhood and beyond. I also see moms that are certainly not postpartum. They're many years well into the journey, but maybe still struggling with some aspects of motherhood, given how complex the experience is. So, yeah, I have my own practice in Minneapolis, also telehealth for folks too. And yeah, I'm on myself, the two kids. So, kind of relate to the journey itself in a helpful way, I think, in working with other moms.
How long have you been in private practice?
So private practice, I'm just past my year kind of anniversary with that. I was at a
Congratulations.
thanks. Yeah, it's been a good year. Yeah, I was at a very a large clinic system for 12-ish years prior to that, doing similar work, but definitely more of a kind of a generalist as a therapist, I'd say. I just knew when I wanted to launch my own practice that I would specialize in seeing moms. And so far, yeah, it's been a wild ride at times, but I'm really glad I made the change. And yeah, I just really like working with other moms and kind of supporting women through this, wild ride of motherhood.
How did you come to the decision to focus on maternal mental health and motherhood?
Yeah, I would say, and probably is an answer many would say that do this kind of work is I became a mom myself. That was very for me. So that was probably little over 6 years ago. I had my first daughter. I was at a different setting right at that point, and I had a supervisor at the time approach me and say, "Hey, do you want to join our kind of reproductive mental health team that they had there?" And my response at the time, I was probably, I was probably 3 months postpartum. I just returned to work. I said, I think I need to process my own experience first, but that might be something I'm interested in doing. So I didn't do that immediately because I just knew, you know, right, as we all have our own journeys and experiences. For those of us that have become parents, I need a little distance from it, but I also piqued my interest in this might be an area of work I'm more passionate about, given some of my own experiences coming into motherhood. So yeah, that kind of started it all.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you're definitely right that that's becoming a mom ourselves, or even, I became a therapist because I had a lot of experience with therapists and, personal experience with that. So,
Yeah.
what are you seeing is the, I feel like parenting and motherhood is kind of shifting, right? We're kind of in this generation. I'm closer to 40 than I'm not anymore. And I really feel that our generation is doing a lot of shifting and working. And I'm curious what your thoughts are on that, personally
Yeah.
or professionally.
Right. So like speak some professional ones first. Well, and it's probably intertwined, of course, my own experience. But yeah, I mean, I feel like I'm seeing, especially moms, right, that are either just pregnant or newly postpartum, have little kids, 5 and under. there's a lot of themes around, which I think is coming directly from social media, right? In a lot of helpful ways in terms of like what's reparenting myself, what's coming up for me in parenting my own kids, that I feel like I'm focusing a lot on my own childhood, or I'm having this maybe difficult relationship with one of my own parents, and why now? What's going on? I would say some more awareness clients have around like, oh, our own childhood stuff comes up when we become parents ourselves. And sometimes it can be really difficult stuff, right? Maybe that people haven't dealt with before. The other big theme I see, right, of course, is like the immense amount of pressure on moms, parents in general. But I would say, if my view maybe is skewed with who I work with, but I think in particular moms, to just do it all the right way, the one way, the best way. Yeah, that pressure can feel immense. And if you're already vulnerable to, say, high expectations of yourself, those are the clients I probably see struggling the most in early motherhood to like find their bearings and also like give themselves a lot of grace. And they're having probably the most anxiety symptoms, right? Or difficulty with like, this experience is living up to what I thought it might be, and how to kind of reconfigure how they want to narrate this experience.
How do you help them navigate that? I've been very open about my postpartum journey on this podcast, on social media in general, because I don't think it's talked about enough.
Right.
I I struggled immensely coming in. I had my daughter at the height of the pandemic in August of 2020, so that didn't help
Well,
anything. But here we're 3.5 years in, we're doing great.
yeah.
We're we are thriving.
Yeah.
Um, but how do you help them maybe navigate that they can rewrite some of that narrative?
Yeah. I think some of it, let's see, what approach do I tend to take first? I think sometimes it is just pointing out where they are being influenced from where they're being influenced, right? Now, of course, most of them probably use social media. And not again, not necessarily in like it's, oh, you're being really influenced by social media, but more about like recognize there are a lot of external reasons you have these beliefs. It's not just you, right? Like, yes, of course, our own experiences, psychology, right, comes into play with how we want to create this vision of being a mom. But I do think in a good way, there's a shift to start to recognize, like, wait a minute here, there are systemic cultural, societal reasons that are continue to get reinforced and also need to change in order for us to have an easier time, like changing some of those internal messages. So, right, we could do the most work in the therapy session on your internal messages yourself, of course, rather than like we're not changing the world. But I do think sometimes it's just pointing out to them, like, yeah, what messages, how did your mom talk about motherhood and how she was and obviously to a broader perspective of like, you know, all media and how they portray motherhood or what makes a good mom. That is just ingrained in women, I think, since childhood.
Yeah.
And so it's just something that like, oh, this is where I'm absorbing all these messages.
It's very overwhelming.
Yes.
I remember everyone in my circle was like, join these motherhood groups and like get on Facebook and join the mom groups. And I did because I didn't know any better. And I had to
Sure.
leave all of them because I was like, I don't, all of this conflicting information, it all felt so overwhelming. It was like, I just want to raise my daughter and I still don't even know what's right or wrong. And I'm just figuring it out every day. But the pressure to do what's right and the feelings to do what's right is insane.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. The minute they're here, right? I mean, in the hospital, it starts.
Right.
Yeah. 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 Well, I think it talk with moms too about, right? Like, this is in what we very natural, right? You want to do your very best, greatest job at this job role, right? Like, of course, you're invested a lot. That's all natural, right? To some degree. But I think, yeah, also separating a little bit like, whoa, what are the other reasons why that starts to feel so intense? And, again, right, it starts really early on, I think, in this like, utter self sacrifice devotion. Just the images of what we have at that are still archaic. They're still like define those words even for us now as moms. If you're parenting now in this generation, like let's redefine those a little bit that are not only more broad, but also not so detrimental to our own mental health and well-being, just in general.
How are you helping moms maybe understand that it's okay to parent differently than we were parented? I have this conversation a lot
Mm.
that we,
Yeah.
the saying of like, I turned out fine, right?
Sure.
Yeah. For example, or like, well, my parents did that. So that must be the way that I should do that. How do you help them understand that that's maybe that it doesn't have to be that way?
Sure. Right. Right. I think going back to what you said about like, right, are we starting to challenge even like, is there one right way? Like, there are multiple ways you can care and love for your kids and raise them. I think too, understanding there's trends in parenting, like in calling it a trend, right? That does, I don't mean to like take away there's validity, right? In like certain parenting strategies with science and research you're backing behind, of course, that stuff. But there is cultural and societal trends in what is the better way, right way, right? And so that was true of your both parents when they were parenting. There was a whatever trend was the best, the biggest one then was then, right? And I think this idea, right? We learn more, we do learn more and maybe more that is because do more research on like, parenting, or we can say there's data to support this theory, or there isn't, or we just don't know. Maybe that helps them flex, like, yeah, there isn't one right way. And also peeling apart, like maybe there are parts you do not want to redo with your kids. And let's talk about why, are you carrying wounds and trauma from your childhood? And maybe there are parts you do want to repeat that your parents did well with, right? Or
Right.
really benefited you. We don't have to take it like as one package, radically change it necessarily.
Okay. Yeah. I like that. You can take parts from it and kind of pick and choose what what worked or maybe what you felt was helpful for you being raised.
Right. Mhm.
Are you finding it I mean, how long have you've been doing this work for a long time, right? Like what is kind of the shift that you've seen maybe pre-pandemic coming out of the pandemic? I think we're seeing a lot more in the news too of, like the school shootings. And are you seeing it more in your practice, just moms worrying all the time?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I went through some of this before the pandemic. Gosh, that's a good question. I'm just thinking really quickly, like to compare, like, does it seem different? I mean, I think, right, we normalize some parental worry. Every mom has to some degree, starting in pregnancy, beyond, right? Because there literally is more to worry about. But yeah, how do we differentiate like, oh, you're anxious, like this is disrupting how you live your life, kind of anxiety? I mean, I guess the thing I noticed, and I would say just even a few weeks ago, that I'm hearing more from clients I have that are, and this is an example of one, but are, let's say, a working parent, working mom, is more of them are choosing to have a hybrid situation of like childcare. So,
Okay.
and I think back to my oldest is 6 when went, and obviously before the pandemic, like there was never, I didn't have conversations with any of my friends about like other arrangements, other, things that would work for our family that I think coming out of the pandemic that I have moms who are, some of them are working while having their infant at home, which there could be good fast, yeah, right? So we might
It's a
talk about,
lot.
yeah, but right, yeah, that's usually my first reaction. But I would say, like, right, again, the nature of their job, like they're finding these ways, and if they're partnered right with their partner too, of like maybe I don't have to send our kid right away to daycare, or is there a way for me to again kind of like narrate this journey of motherhood that doesn't have to, that could just uniquely fit our family's needs? That I wonder is more post pandemic, right? That a lot of us got used to literally not having any childcare, potentially for a time and just figuring it out. Then I feel like that's got to be some kind of, like I said, right, like kind of consequence of the pandemic, both for good, but I think also, yeah, like really need to think about that too, because that is a lot to take at once. And I mean, that is a good question. Regards like illness, right? We think, let's just say illness in general, and there still seems to be this, like, how worried should we be about COVID or not? Is it like the flu? What are we doing? Are there a protocol left? Like, right? I feel like that's still kind of in motion for all of us, of course. Yeah, I don't know if I see a huge difference if you're already kind of a tend toward anxiety. It's just such a ripe area, right? Like your kid getting sick, right? For anxiety to manifest when you have really little kids too. Um, so I always hear it's probably once a week, right? From somebody of like a lot of anxiety about their kid getting sick.
Yeah, I can relate to that in my own practice too. The
Yeah.
germs everywhere all the time. But it's okay. And that's okay, right? Germs aren't always bad. I
Yes.
imagine that being a working parent and having your child at home while you're working adds to maybe the mental load or the pressure. For those that are listening, how can they offset some of that?
Well, I think ideally, right? If you are partnered, I think it's some really clear conversations ideally before hand, but looking at, that division of labor or if we are going to use this system right with our family, like how is this going to work? Right. I guess probably depends, right? Does your partner work at a house? Be in the house, like of course, all these different variables for each family. But what I can reference, right, is like clients I've worked with before that maybe are doing some version of that, where I would say inevitably there is usually some conversation we are also having about like, it seems like we need to make some adjustment to this for your own mental health sake. It doesn't mean like totally radically changing your childcare situation or how you're juggling this, but how can you add in more help and more support? You
Mm.
know, is it one day a week you are going to have somebody care for, your baby, or that's a lot to do all at once. And there's a lot of that. Even if you can physically do it, this is also the conversation we have a lot, right? Of you might physically be able to do it, but what's happening to your brain? What's
Right.
mentally happening? And as you are constantly shifting your focus of attention, or you're literally trying to do two things at once, like that's hard to sustain that for a long period of time.
And then that does trickle into the physical side, right? More
Yeah, right,
more exhaustion, more illness. It's
right.
all tied together.
Mhm,
Yeah.
mhm. Yeah.
Are you seeing moms more or less willing to ask for support? I think it goes back to the pressure of we should
Yeah.
be able to do it all.
Right. Yeah.
Oh,
And or I think the idea was sold. That's true.
right.
Again, externally, I think a little bit we can. You could, well, of course, give a you can't, right? But like, it doesn't. I think what happened a lot with that, I experienced it myself too, was like, well, yes, I can, but it doesn't look like what I thought it would look like. Or in order to be sustained, like 100% at home, 100% at work, like literally is not possible. There's not, the pie chart doesn't add up. uh, you know, I don't know if I could say they're more willing. What I would say is it's a very common thing we work on in therapy
Yeah.
is improving their willingness slash ultimately, right? I think it's more giving themselves permission,
Yeah.
right? They really probably do want the help, but it's challenging all those inner beliefs to your point, right? About like, what's it mean about me if I need more help, or why can't I do this all by myself? Or, some of which too, I think is very individualistic to this country, how we raise kids and parent, which is very much like you're on your own.
Yeah.
Like you had them, you figure it out. There's a tone of that in our country a lot that I think also
Yeah.
reinforces like you and your partner figure it out or whatever your situation is, right? Like it's not society's job to help a man at all.
Which is really unfortunate.
It's
And I think really detrimental and heartbreaking to know that that's our system.
right, right.
Right. And to know, I think before I became a mom, I was aware peripherally. Like
Mm,
I'd seen my friends struggle, I my clients struggle, and I didn't realize that that was the reality, I think, until I became a mom. I was like,
sure. I mean,
"Oh, there
yeah.
isn't a lot of support here." And that's really upsetting, and I think sets us up not to majorly fail, but it definitely doesn't really set us up to succeed either. Right.
And it's a setup to internalize it's something with you is why it's not working or too hard or is
Yeah.
versus yeah, looking systemically like and where was that more apparent than in the pandemic? I think for parents, both school age and like, childcare age, where is that more apparent that we had no social structure to support childcare parents? Like, everybody was struggling, of course, in all ways, but I think that was really apparent then too. And if you were a parent, whatever your situation was then, was like, oh my gosh, how,
Yeah.
well, I'm supposed to navigate this, or more of a feeling like, yeah, you're on your own. Sorry.
Yeah, and we just figure it out because we have to,
Yeah.
right? There's no other option.
Right.
Why do we internalize all of this stuff? Especially as mom and women.
Yeah.
Why do we do that? Why? What?
Yeah. I still ask myself that question, right?
Yeah. I mean, I'm just curious of your thoughts. Like, why? I understand the pressure aspect of in the societal pressures and that, but is there ever going to be a kind of a breaking point of this can stop? We don't have to do this, but yet we still continue to do it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I don't know if this is a fair, well, it makes me think about, right, too, like when we understand for, just to use a, like a therapeutic theory of sorts, right? That like, what does your inner child say about like, kids' tendencies, right, to blame themselves when there are adult things going on they don't understand or aren't getting enough guidance about, right, or support about, right? Like, take a really a simple example, right? A child's parents divorce, kids often will interpret like it's something they did or it's their fault, right? But we know as adults, like that's not true. It does, I think, a little bit about like when we feel like there's no other reason we're being given why something is difficult. And then we also absorb messages externally that like it is our fault, right? Or it is an inadequacy. Are we kind of left with like, well, I guess it isn't my fault? Or like when that support isn't there, or even like I think not talked about a lot, right? Like, oh, what are the systemic cultural problems of how we constructed motherhood, parenthood, and probably are facing more often than not people saying like, this is you, right? Or just pick the right way or the best way and you won't feel guilty and bad about yourselves. I don't know. Does that lead us to, but it's just the only conclusion we can draw. Well, I guess that is what it is. Because nobody's offering me anything else.
Right.
Yeah. I don't know. That's maybe an imperfect answer. And I don't know the answer either. Like,
No, I think it's
is it,
also a very big question.
yeah, just our
Right.
human vulnerability to be like, well, there must be something wrong. I'm,
Yeah. When you mentioned inner child work, I I think that is a growing area of our field, or maybe just because people are becoming more aware of it.
yeah.
Maybe our generation particularly, kind of mainstream and pop culture references to it. Are you finding that helpful in your work? I personally find it helpful in my own work with like myself, but also with my clients too, and what you're seeing with that.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'd say overall, I think it's like helpful. There's more awareness, right? Or it's being talked about on social media and pop culture. Trying to think if I've ever, yeah, like seen it with a client maybe or something where I felt like, oh, this is take it too far, right? Or a misinterpretation maybe of like the idea. And it's probably hard for me to say too because I probably see a lot of my clients that do come in like one of their vulnerabilities to struggling in parenthood might be that they have difficult relationships with kids.
Mhm.
Not always by any means, but I don't know, are they more prone to maybe attached to that idea or have some insight for themselves, like, oh, maybe this is something it does come up for me when my kid does XYZ thing and I get really upset and activated. Is there a connection to my own childhood and like, right, Anita had then that wasn't met consistently enough?
Right.
I do think sometimes it does put inadvertently puts more pressure on doing the right thing by their own kid,
Okay.
right? Because they don't want to accept, they don't want to do the same thing. It's really hard, I think. Yeah, well, personally, professionally, right, and helping other people to be like, gosh, what is this middle area of like, you could make change and almost like trying not to say do better per se, because that brings this pressure
Yeah.
of like, don't mess up your kid. What, how do we, I don't answer this either. Totally right. You like, how do we kind of balance like doing something different and also giving ourselves enough grace and compassion that we're going to mess up? We actually can't, we are in less control than we think we are about the outcome of our kid. And I mean, in terms of like, yes, barring like abuse, like, like that's, I think we can over identify with our kids sometimes. Like we forget, like they're all little people that, yeah, they're gonna make their own little decisions, even at 3 or 4 or whatever. Like, yeah, yeah,
Yeah. Tell me
I
about
know about
it.
it.
I have a very opinionated 3-year-old. She has a lot of thoughts and makes them very clear. Yeah, I think it's really hard to get over the fact that I messing up is such a weird term to me. Like, what does that even mean? What does it mean that we're gonna mess them up? Like they're gonna turn out to be terrible people. They're gonna be bullies. Like, what does that even mean? And I think I've in my postpartum journey, I've been fortunate to have a lot of great therapists for my own personal journey who have really helped me understand that, like you're saying, they are going to turn out to be their own people. And all you can do is really identify what your role is in that. And like
Yeah,
my only hope for my daughter is that she becomes a kind, loving, caring person who does something halfway decent with her life. Like, fine. Just just go finish college, maybe finish high school, maybe go to college, like live your life, but just be a nice person. And I feel like that has removed some of the pressure from me of like all I have to do is show up and also be a nice person to her
sure. Hmm.
and make her and meet her basic needs because she's 3. But
Right. Yeah.
yeah, of like, I don't even know. Like, we will all mess up. We're humans.
Yes. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Right.
And
And
I don't know. The radical acceptance around that has been like, oh, I'm for sure going to make a mistake raising this child. But like,
yeah.
so is everybody else.
Right. Yeah. Like you can't come through. How would we put this? Yeah. Like you're not going to come through childhood into your adulthood unscathed. And sure, you might end up in your own therapist's office as an adult and meet your parents. Sure. Yes. We'll all do it. And not that it's saying it's not ever valid, but yeah, I don't know. Of course, right. You probably only have that wisdom once you're in adulthood, but I do think that, yeah, it's humans raising humans. Like there's no way to be perfect at it or never mess up. And I do think, I guess, going back to a discussion about like influences and pressure and externally, right? Some of the anxiety I see, well, that I think is due to a lot of the overuse of the word trauma in traumatizing your kids. That isn't,
Yeah.
on social media in particular. I just think and maybe by nature of how we consume social media, it's overconsumption in terms of like hearing moms really concerned that like if I do X with the thing, it's a trauma to their child
Right.
and trying to help them walk back like, all right, first let's clinically define what trauma is, and helping them understand that. Identify what is their real worry here, right? Do you have control over that? There's this huge space in repairing with your kids when you do mess up that we forget about that is healing and often kids move on quicker than we do, right? Being clear about like, yeah, well, what's the difference between like a repetitive harmful situation that's happening with your kid because you lack the skills to regulate your own emotions versus like yeah, you probably are going to yell at your kid here and there. You're probably going to lose your cool. You're probably going to say something you regret. But that's different than like, I have traumatized my child. They're forever scarred.
Yeah.
Just give me some perspective on that because I think there's a little overboard with, like anything and everything you do is going to traumatize your kids in their lifetime.
Mhm. What a great clarification. And I think it's really important. I think social media is just kind of this runaway train that
That's
sucks us in. And even as adults, we don't know how to always get back out, or
right.
to separate the fact and the not factual, and like what's real and what's not. And just what a great clarification of not everything you do is going to traumatize your child. And it takes a lot to inflict trauma, right? Like, yeah, I think that will land well with a lot of people who probably are concerned about that and will be concerned about that going forward. But
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, I think it's not into like, well, I may want to take it back. I was just maybe going to say, like, if I'm just thinking about the clients I've seen where this worry comes up more often, right? Like, do they really truly do have traumatic childhoods? And that's part of where it comes from versus, yeah, there's probably a correlation there, right?
yeah,
So they're worried in some ways, like valid, right? They want to do differently. They want a child to have the same experiences, but sometimes I can see like they don't allow themselves any space, right?
right.
Just to forgive themselves, right? Or have some trust and just like you're also building resiliency in your kid. You're teaching them that. You're modeling other things, of course, like apologizing and things like that, and acknowledging accountability if you mess up. And allowing, like, yeah, we have a lot of mess ups, and
Yeah, yeah, that's great. Do you do any, maybe this is a personal question on my end, like work with the mom? I struggled a lot. I mean, I did struggle a lot. I struggled a great deal. I had a very difficult entry into motherhood. My attachment to my daughter was pretty minimal. How are you helping moms through that? It was a weird experience. I was like, I expected rainbows and butterflies and love and just this great, great experience. It was the complete opposite.
yeah, that's a really common source of feeling a ton of mom guilt for new moms.
Yeah.
Like, I didn't immediately feel puppies and rainbows or deep, crazy, wild love for my baby. Like, oh my God, something's wrong with me. I'm terrible. I guess what I repeat the most, though, right? Yes, there can be like clinical level reasons mom is experiencing that. She literally has depression, right? Or she has very high anxiety that can cause that to be their experience, right? That detachment. Ultimately, though, again, right? It's a fault. Like, that's they're having a medical condition happening to them, right? But I also see it a ton with just what I think are moms really having what are common experiences that never get. And then it takes one relative to make a remark, maybe your friend about like, oh my gosh, wasn't it the best thing, the best day they were born or whatever? And you're only referencing like, I felt terrible. I felt all my body. XYZ thing happened. I had traumatic birth. Like, get all the things that can happen. But then you feel like something's wrong. And, you know, and you'd think about, somebody said this to me with my first two. This is a new little person to you. You are immediately attached and bonded to your partner when you met them, were you? Like, you have to develop a relationship that takes time. And that's harder to do for some when, right, your baby's like a little worm that only pees and poops and cries and you're sleep deprived. You think about the other, like, very logical reasons. It might be hard to like tap into that sense of attachment right away. That again, people just don't talk about it enough like that. It actually makes logical sense. You might not tap into that right away or feel that right away.
Yeah.
But that is such a, I would say, myth of motherhood that happens immediately for everybody in the same way.
Yeah, it definitely does not. And it's it's kind of just like a weird feeling. I think when you realize that you're not having the experience that
Mhm.
someone told you you would have or should have.
Right. Right. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Really.
And I don't know, maybe it does go back to the guilt, but I was like, this is weird. I don't feel this. I must be the weird one here. I must be the strange one
Yeah.
who didn't bond with their child right away.
Right. I think some sort of like maternal instinct.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's, yeah. It is unfortunate because we don't share it because we'll feel judged, right? Or
Right.
something wrong with us. Yeah. Even though we can like, and the other thing I think about too often when people will, if that's been their experience, right? And then they talk about like, they try to talk about somebody else or somebody made a comment or something made them doubt themselves that almost always right. It's people, they're looking back on their own experience with a lot of time and distance. So what tends to stand out when you look at something like having a baby, right? Especially for somebody who didn't have a really full adjustment, it's going to be all the great stuff.
Right.
You're going to, maybe they even really emphasize it a little bit, what their actual experience was. That's what we hear more often than say like, I was struggling with that too. Mhm.
I do feel like the motherhood community, maybe especially in Minneapolis too, and Minnesota is growing and just having more of these conversations, whether it's through groups or workshops or just trying to bring more moms together. Are you noticing that too?
I think so. Yeah, for sure. I mean, like I refer people a lot to, right, finding their community and moms.
Mhm.
So I know about a lot of the groups, right, or things like that. But I feel like I'm seeing more moms doing them, taking advantage of
Yeah.
that more. It's like almost as like, oh yeah, for sure. I'm doing the group at, like I'm a parenting, for example, has great moms groups. They're already before I've maybe even mentioned, like, do you know there are like these things with those be helpful part of your support system? And like, oh yeah, I'm already doing. And I
That's
just think
great.
it's like, yeah, like a show of like, oh, didn't even have to suggest it. Like they already feel like, hey, this is a good thing to do. It's a radical life changing experience to want to have.
Mhm. What is kind of the one thing you want moms or women to know? What's like your shout from the rooftop thing?
Ah, good question. I mean, as cliche as that might sound, but if I think about what most moms need to hear, especially, well, I'd say especially early on, and actually probably their entire motherhood journey, is that you're a good, right? It sounds really simple. It sounds a little trite, but when I see moms, right, often a very vulnerable spot, sitting in a therapist's office, right, where they just started coming and being really mature about therapy, that how helpful I can see, right? You can see that reaction, right, too, and like you are a good, like that is innate in you. That is not something you have to prove by doing all the right things or all the best things or right, like all the stuff that like trusting yourself, letting letting yourself also know this is like a totally new job. There are aspects of this job that suck. Like they are not, you would not sign up to do them alone, right? You wouldn't sign up to what schools, but like as a job, just for that, right? If that was the
Right.
only thing. So it's okay and normal. There's aspects you're not gonna like find really hard or difficult. Right? But that doesn't mean you're not a good one.
Yeah. I think it's also really hard to feel good when there's no maybe return on investment, right? Like you are giving
Yes.
100% of you to this human being with nothing back until they can interact.
Right, right, right. Yeah.
And that's
So it's hard.
yeah.
Yeah, always, right? Yeah, you can. I'm a 4 and 6 year old, and sometimes I'm like, you know, fair point, right? Like, what are you getting out of it, or the investment return? But yeah, it is this constant like rechecking of yourself. Probably, I'm gonna guess for the journey of parenthood, right? Of like, yeah, I'm probably never gonna get the full acknowledgement or recognition. Thanks in the moment.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh,
It
it's
just,
never else.
they're just worms for such a long time, but it's just like, just give, 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 give. Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
You got to refill that pitcher because that is about all you're doing in those early phases, right? Like,
yeah. I have one final question. This is completely off topic, but it's
okay.
one that I just kind of like to add. Like, I just get curious sometimes and just kind of like to throw in a random question. But if nobody knew what you did, like if you could do anything in the world and nobody knew what it was, what would you do with your life?
Mm. Oh, gosh. What I want to do with my life.
And there's no parameters, just that nobody knows what you do. You just do whatever it is and nobody knows.
Yeah. I mean, I would travel. I'd be like, yeah, I would travel the world. Maybe a travel writer.
Oh,
Um, or photographer. I have no skills in either, but they sell. Yeah. And I get, I don't know. I'm just, I think that answer comes to me as it connects back to like the things I like to do before I think, well, how do I have more time?
yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it's a little more adventurous maybe than my career. Much as I do like it, like, yeah, wouldn't that be fun to be like new places, new people, new food? Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds great. The people who I've asked and my responses have they've just been kind of wild. Some have been like, I would still do this job. And they're like, it's okay if you wouldn't.
Yeah, I
Good
didn't
for you that
expect
you
it.
would. You know?
I did not even fall through like, yeah, no, I think it totally less giving job.
Yeah. Another person I interviewed was like, I would just go live on an island. I was like, I will that sounds great. I will come join you.
Yeah. Yeah. Some job that is only about my own needs.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So, well, thank you for your time. This has been such a good conversation. I think that a lot of people will get a lot out of it and really resonate with a lot of the listeners and people that will check it out. So thank you again for taking time out of your day to be here.
Works. Welcome. And it was a fun, good conversation. I like, yeah. Always can talk endlessly about these topics.
Yeah.
I hope you found today's episode supportive. If you would like to schedule with Kendra or follow her on social media, please find the links in the show notes. Thank you for listening, and please take care of yourself today.